Shalom. Welcome back to Parsha Highlights and Insights. This is Rabbi Avraham Fisher, and this week's Parasha is Vayechi. With this Parasha, we will conclude Sefer Bereshit, which has brought us all the way from the creation of the universe to the last days of Yaakov and also of Yosef. That's what we're going to have in this parasha. At the end of the last parasha, you may recall, uh, all of the family of Yaakov is now down in Egypt. They're all reunited. Yaakov is reunited with Yosef. Yosef was reunited with his brothers. Yosef was also taking care of the people of Egypt, the distribution of food during the years of famine. And Yaakov and his family, now collectively called Yisrael, people of Israel, are now living in Egypt, living specifically in the area called Goshen, which is an area that's suitable for them because it's good grazing land. It's close enough to where Yosef lives, but far enough away from where most Egyptians live so that they can lead a relatively undisturbed life, although there's indications that they're so successful that they even have begin to acquire property in the area, even beyond Goshen. So let's see how Parashat Vayechi brings us to the end of this journey. So Vayechi begins by telling us that Yaakov is now living in Egypt with his entire family, and he lives there for a period of 17 years. And that number is significant because 17 is also the age at which Yosef was separated from his father. But now Yaakov, in his last 17 years of life, is living together with his family. There's apparently no serious friction, and he can live out the rest of his life in peace. Yaakov is at this point 147 years old. Yaakov summons Yosef, and he makes Yosef swear that Yaakov is to be buried in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, bring his body back all the way to Hebron for burial. Seems that the reason why Yaakov especially charges Yosef with this task is because Yosef has the ability, has the power to do what he wants, more or less, as long as it is approved of by Paro. And so Yosef is the one who will take the responsibility of burying, of seeing to it that Yaakov will be buried in the cave of Machpelah, and Yosef swears to this effect, and Yaakov is pleased with this. The next major incident is when Yosef comes to Yaakov another time, and this is because Yosef hears that Yaakov is sick, and this could mean the end for Yaakov, and Yosef wants to make sure that before Yaakov dies, that he'll have an opportunity to bless his own children, Yosef's children, Menashe and Ephraim. And so he takes Menashe and Ephraim, and in order to be blessed by Yaakov. Yaakov, in the meanwhile, receives word that Yosef is on his way, and he sits up in the bed and Yosef comes. So this next part is where Yaakov does, in fact, bless Menashe, Ephraim, and Menashe. He says to Yosef a number of things. First of all, he says that even back in Canaan, and a place called Luz, a place which was also renamed as Bet El, God blessed me and told me that he was going to make me fruitful and multiply. That's before Yaakov was married, before Yaakov had any children, and now Yaakov is very pleased to say that Hashem has fulfilled all of his promises. He has been made into a community of nations. Uh, he has all of these children, which who will found the various tribes, the various shvatim that will be the people of Israel. Now, and he also points out to Yosef that the two children of Yosef, namely who were born here in Egypt, Ephraim and Menashe. So Yaakov declares that they are to be mine, meaning not just as grandchildren, but equivalent with my children, that they are going to establish tribes of their own. And indeed, there isn't just Yosef, there isn't just a tribe of Yosef, there are two tribes that come from Yosef, two Shvatim, namely the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Menashe. And this is because Yaakov made this declaration. Yaakov, by the way, also points out that if Yosef has any other children, then they are to be considered as Yaakov's grandchildren. They won't found tribes of their own, but they will be included with the other tribes. But there's no indication that Yosef had any other children. At this point, that Yaakov virtually apologizes um, for the fact that he could not bury Rachel, that is Yosef's mother, in the cave of Machpelah. He had to bury her on the road to Beit Lechem because that's where she went into labor to give birth to Binyamin and died giving birth to him. Yaakov really had no way of changing that, so he had to bury her along that road. And um, the implication is, but I still want you to bury me in the cave of Machpelah. And Yaakov will actually mention this again later on to all of his children. It's at this point that Yaakov sees, or maybe doesn't see very well because his eyes are weak with age. But there are two people in front of him. He wants to know who they are, and Yosef says, well, these are my children, your grandchildren. And Yaakov says, bring them to me so that I can give them a bracha. Now, Yaakov cannot see very well. Of course, Yaakov embraces them and kisses them. He's very emotional about the fact that there was a time that he thought he would never see Yosef again because he thought Yosef had been taken from him, and now Hashem has blessed me to make it possible for me to see not only you, but to see your children. Now, Yosef brings his two children over to Yaakov to receive a blessing, and Menashe is the older one, so he places Menashe at Yaakov's right and Ephraim to Yaakov's left, thinking that the right, the one who's older, is going to be blessed first. But Yaakov changes the position of his hands. He crosses his hands such that he puts his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Menashe, and he wants to give them a bracha. And Yaakov blesses them. It's actually a blessing that he's giving to Yosef, and it's a blessing that uh, we learn from Yaakov should be given to all of our children. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. God is praising Ephraim and Menashe for the kinds of people that they are. He's also blessing Yosef for the good work he's done in making Ephraim and Menashe the way they are. It's been said very simply that Ephraim and Menashe grew up in a totally non Jewish, we might say, environment. And yet, apparently, Yosef has been successful in raising Ephraim and Menashe in this environment despite the difficulties. So it's a credit to them. It's a credit to Yosef as well. It's a blessing for Yosef. And we also bless our children on Friday night. That's the traditional bracha. To bless our children, may you be like Ephraim and Menashe. One little problem that Yosef picks up on is that Yaakov has placed his right hand on Ephraim, even though Ephraim is not the older one; he's the younger one, and Yosef tries to uncross his hands um, to to make it possible for Yaakov to put his right hand on Menashe, and yet Yaakov insists, no, I know what I'm doing. Um, I know, and I'm aware of who is the older one and who's the younger one. However, I tell you that that even though Ephraim is the younger one, his tribe will be the greater one. His tribe will be the more dominant one. Uh, Certainly more dominant than Ephraim, although Menashe is also a very great tribe as well. Before he completes this bracha, he tells Yosef that I give you a double portion uh, in among my inheritance. In other words, at least on one level, Yosef is to be treated as the firstborn. He isn't the firstborn of all of the children. He is the firstborn of Rachel, but he gets a double portion in that he creates two of the tribes, two of the Shvatim, whereas all of the other brothers receive one tribe each. Each one establishes his own individual tribe. After this, Yaakov summons all of his children in order to give all of them a blessing. So this is the next major part of the parasha, in which Yaakov blesses his children. The bracha starts with an introduction saying that all of my children are to gather around me because I'm going to reveal to you what will happen in the end of days. Meaning, I'm going to reveal to you what will be your future, the type of tribes that you're going to establish. Um, it's a description of the kind of people that they are, the kind of tribes that will come from them, and where appropriate, Yaakov also is critical, uh, will be critical of his sons. Rashi says that Yaakov even intended at this point to reveal the end of days, meaning the ultimate redemption, but Hashem took away from him the ability to reveal uh, that fact. And then Yaakov proceeds to give each one of his children a bracha. He starts, of course, with Ruvain, who is his firstborn, but uh, even though he's his firstborn, Yaakov also has a certain criticism of Ruvain. He criticizes his lack of decision, his lack of decisiveness, his his inability to take a very clear stand. And he's also very critical of what Ruvain did after the death of Leah, involving Bilhah. And it would seem from this that Ruvain, as a result, loses the special privilege of the firstborn. Then Yaakov proceeds to give the blessings to Shimon and Levi, and he talks about the two of them together, remembering that they are brothers. They are very close to each other, but he's critical of their violent streak, their anger, and uh, he has a real problem. Their anger, of course, uh, going back to the incident involving Dinah and Shechem, when they massacred the people, the men of Shechem, and Yaakov thought that that was, to put it mildly, excessive, and so they too lose the opportunity to be the firstborn. It's not passed from Ruvain to them. Um, Yaakov further says that they are to be divided up, to be split up, not to be kept together, because together they can be very dangerous. And actually, what happened is that Shimon's territory eventually blended in with the territory of Yehuda, and Levi did not have territory in one specific place, but rather had cities scattered throughout the kingdom. Then Yaakov proceeds to Yehuda. And when it comes to Yehuda, Yaakov is very praiseworthy of Yehuda's ability. He recognizes that the brothers acknowledge him for his natural leadership abilities, and he compares Yehuda to a lion, with all of the strength of a lion and the command of a lion. And it's very clear from this that Yaakov has decided that the leadership, the future leadership of the people of Israel, will come from Yehuda. And indeed, the, the kings of Israel, certainly starting with David, come from the tribe of Yehuda, and they are to be the designated royal dynasty. There's even an indication that this will continue up until and including Mashiach, that Mashiach will be a descendant from Yehuda. There's also a praise of Yehuda's territory, the wine that comes from that territory as well. So Yehuda gets quite a bit of blessing, and in a sense, Yehuda is given a special portion. He doesn't get a double portion, but he gets a special portion. And as I said, he gets the leadership. Why does Yehuda get the blessing of leadership and not Yosef? It's a problem with Yosef, even though Yosef has proven leadership abilities. He served as the vizier in Egypt for 70 years, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, Yosef doesn't seem to command the same level of respect from the other brothers that Yehuda does. So Yehuda is going to be the leader. Yosef gets the double portion of territory, 2 tribes. Yaakov continues to talk about the other sons, his other sons that come from Leah. It's interesting that at this point he changes the birth order. Up until this point, it's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. The next 2 should be first Yisachar and then Zevulun. The blessing of Zevulun is that Zevulun is going to live by the water. He will be a merchant. Yisachar is compared to a hard-working donkey, and also will have blessing. Usual understanding is that Yisachar is the between the two of them, between Yisachar and Zevulun, Yisachar is devoted to the difficult work of teaching Torah and deciding matters of Torah, serving as a judge, and Zevulun is, because he's a merchant, is able to support Yisachar financially, and therefore that could be why Zevulun gets placed first, because he is the one who will support Yisachar. To this point, that Yaakov moves on to the blessing of Dan, who is the oldest of the children of Bilhah, and Dan is compared to a snake in his ability to fight and to attack. Chazal say that this is an allusion to the great leader that comes from the tribe of Dan, Shimshon, who will lead the war against the Pelishtim. Then Yaakov talks about gives the blessing of Gad. Now, Gad is also the older, but of Zilpah. So Yaakov talks about the two firstborns of these two wives. It's more or less their birth order, although it's possible that Dan and Naphtali were born one after the other. Gad is also compared to a military troop that has great military ability, and then Asher, who is the younger brother of Gad, and Asher's territory is very rich, very fruitful, providing delicacies that are even fit for a king. Naphtali is compared to a gazelle that can run very fast. He's considered the messenger of all of the tribes. He can run very, very fast, and he also brings back good tidings, even from the battlefront. And now, Yaakov turns to the two children of Rachel. First, Yosef. Now, Yosef, there's a lot to say about Yosef. Great praise, how he is preferred, how he is loved, and yet he suffered. He suffered, would seem, at the hands of his brothers. It's not that clear that Yaakov knows to what extent the brothers mistreated Yosef and sold him as a slave. It's not clear that Yaakov actually knew that, but he certainly could tell that there was animosity, and Yosef suffered. But nevertheless, Yosef is blessed, and as we said, Yosef receives the blessing of double tribe among all of the other brothers. And finally, Binyamin, who is compared to a wolf, and Chazal point out the fact that another great king comes from the first of the kings. Shaul comes from Binyamin, but he does not. His reign does not continue beyond. But Binyamin, as a wolf, also is very strong and can be very daring in a military context as well. Yaakov concludes saying that all of these are the children of and the tribes of Israel, 12 of them. That's how many tribes there are. And Yaakov blessed all of them before he died. Yaakov concludes with a command. This time he tells all of his children that they are to bury him, to bring his body back to Canaan, to the cave of Machpelah, and to bury him there. That is the place, he says, where Avraham and Sarah are buried, Yitzchak and Rivka are buried. that is where he says, I buried Leah, and that is where I want you to bury me. It's the cave that Abraham originally purchased for this purpose in the land of Canaan, near the city of within the city of Hebron. And with that, Yaakov uh, gathers his feet onto the bed, uh, and then dies. Of course, the reaction to the death of Yaakov is very emotional. Uh, Yosef cries. He falls down before him, and Yaakov's body needs to be taken to Canaan for burial. Now that's a great distance away, and the body needs to be prepared for this journey, so that it doesn't begin to decompose. And so he gives orders. Yosef gives orders to the people in Egypt who know how to do this to prepare Yaakov's body for burial, and it's a period of 40 days. The usual translation is embalming, whether it's the same kind of embalming that the Egyptians did with the pharaohs. I tend to doubt it because that's really invasive, but there must have been some way of preparing the body for burial so that it could be, preparing it for transport so that it could be brought all the way to Canaan. And there is a period of crying for Yaakov in Egypt. It would seem not only his own family cries and mourns for him, but very likely all of Egypt. Chazal say that when Yaakov came to Egypt, the famine started to come to an end, and so they appreciate Yaakov for that as well. The total period of mourning for Yaakov in the land of Egypt is 70 days. When that period is over, Yosef says to Paro that my father made me swear that I would bury him in the land of Canaan. So I'm duty bound by this oath. And Yosef also mentions that I want to go up to Canaan, bury my father, and then I will return. Because Yosef still has responsibilities in Egypt. And Paro gives him permission and says, go up to Canaan and bury your father. And the Torah describes an enormous entourage that takes Yaakov's body up to Canaan. Yosef himself, plus many members of his own entourage, as well as Yaakov's children, all of those who came down to Egypt. They all go up to Canaan. They all go up to Canaan in order to bury Yaakov. So whereas Yosef and the entourage and the family go up to Canaan, Yaakov, the families of Yosef and his brothers are left in Egypt, and of course that will ensure that they will return. But when they come close to the land of Canaan, they come to a place that's called Goren Ha'atad. And there, once again, there's a period of 7 days of mourning at this place. And the local inhabitants can see that this is a great funeral entourage that has come from Egypt. It's very recognizable as coming from Egypt. And so they call this place Avel Mitzrayim, the mourning of Egypt. Seems to be coming from Egypt. And indeed, Egypt also wants to show respect for Yaakov. Yaakov and his sons carry Yaakov's body for burial in the cave of Machpelah, which they do. The indication is that only Yaakov's sons actually carry the body. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then they return to Egypt. When they return to Egypt, the aftermath of the funeral is that the brothers try to appease Yosef. They're afraid that now that Yaakov is no longer alive, Yosef will avenge himself for the way they treated him. So they say that before father died, he commanded that you forgive us. And they even say that we are prepared to be your slaves. Whether Yaakov ever actually said this is not that clear. The way that Chazal understand it is that the brothers are actually making this up. They're not completely truthful, but they're doing this in order to preserve shalom, in order to preserve peace in the family. Yosef's reaction is, "Am I in Hashem's place that I should seek revenge?" It's very clear that this is what Hashem wanted. Whatever your intentions were, it is very clear that Hashem wanted me to be here to make it possible for you to survive during the time of famine. And so we come to the very last days of Yosef. The Torah tells us that Yosef supports all of his extended family. He lives to the age of 110 years. He even lives to see great-great-grandchildren. They are raised on his knees. Before he dies, Yosef makes his final request of his family. He says, "The time will come that Hashem will remember you and will bring you up out of this place. I want you to swear that you will carry my body as well to be buried in Canaan." Now, his body is not to be buried in the cave of Machpelah because that's only for the Avot and the Imahot. Yosef later on is buried in Shechem, but he makes them swear that when the time comes, when God remembers them, that they will take his body to be buried in Canaan. And so Yosef dies at the age of 110, and the Torah concludes this parasha and the book of Bereshit by saying that Yosef's body is preserved and placed in a coffin in Egypt, and that body will be taken out of Egypt at the time of the Exodus, and will only be buried much later. It's actually at the end of the book of Yehoshua when Yosef is finally brought to rest. Let's take a look at the burial of Yaakov. Vayasu vanav lo kain ka'asher tzivam. His sons, meaning Yaakov's sons, did to him as he had instructed them, as he had commanded them. What did they do? Vayisu oto banav alza Canaan, and his sons carried him up to the land of Canaan. Vayikberu oto, and they buried him b'maratz de Machpelah, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, asher kana Avraham et hasadeh lechuzat kaver. Avraham had purchased this territory, this field, for a permanent burial site. Made Ephron Achiti al Penei Mamre, from Ephron the Hittite, which is near Mamre. Rashi takes note of the fact that that even though there's a large entourage that comes from Egypt to carry Yaakov's body, but there seems to be an emphasis that it is his sons and his sons alone who bury him. First verse says that they did ka'asher tzivam, as he had commanded them. And what is it that he had commanded them? So in the next verse, we're told that his sons carry him. His sons and not his grandsons, because he gave the command that no one, the only ones who should carry his bier, his the bed upon which his body is carried, the only ones are to be no Egyptian, none of their children who may have been born from other wives, from Canaanite wives, only his own sons, Yaakov's own sons. Furthermore, Rashi quotes the Midrash that he told them exactly how they are to position themselves around his funeral bed. Three to the east, and so on to all four directions, three in each direction, and it's the exact same arrangement that the tribes of Israel would be encamped in the desert. It's exactly the same layout. Levi himself would not carry because Levi would someday carry the Aron, the holy ark, and Yosef would not carry because he has the position of a king. Menashe and Ephraim would take their places so that there would be 12, and in this way, there were 12 carrying Yaakov. And when the Torah would later say that each one would be encamped in the desert, each one be'otot, by signs, the signs are the signs that Yaakov had given them back in Egypt. So the same way that Yaakov instructed that they should be positioned around his funeral bier, that is the position. Those are the positions of the 12 tribes in their encampment in the desert. Very fascinating foreshadowing of what will happen when all of the tribes will be gathered and encamped in the desert. And this brings us to the end of Parashat Vayechi, as well as the end of Sefer Bereshit. When we get to the end of Sefer Bereshit, we say Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. Let us be strengthened, and we take the strength in order to proceed beyond Sefer Bereshit and read and learn the rest of the Torah. The next parasha will be in the beginning of the book of Shemot. I thank you all again for joining me for Parasha Highlights and Insights. Once again, this has been Rabbi Avraham Fisher saying Shalom. Well, I thank you very much for joining me again for Parasha Highlights and Insights. We'll see what happens next week's Parasha and the final portion of Sefer Bereshit, the end of the life of Yaakov and of Yosef as well, and the preparation for the next phase of Jewish history, which will be in the book of Shemot. But until then, thank you all very much for joining me. This is Rabbi Avraham Fisher for Parasha Highlights and Insights saying Shalom.